Because of the way that the Army hierarchy kept news of any integrated units from the public, no one really had any understanding that blacks contributed anything other than the Tuskegee Airmen.
Basketball superstar and amateur historian Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Today on Now I've Heard Everything, I'm Bill Thompson. There was actually a battalion of the U.S. Army in World War II that had to fight for the chance to fight. It was the all-black 761st Tank Battalion. Now, they trained for over 2 years, but were never permitted to go into actual combat, at least until the American forces in Europe were overwhelmed by superior German tanks in the summer of 1944. So that's when the 761st Tank Battalion, dubbed the Black Panthers, were deployed under the leadership of General George Patton. Now, one member of the 761st was a soldier named Leonard Smith. His friends called him Smitty. And Smitty had a friend, another GI, whose son later became one of the greatest basketball players of our time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, Smitty's story struck a chord with Abdul-Jabbar, who then sought out other members of the battalion, interviewed them, got their stories, and he put them in a book that he called Brothers in Arms. And I talked with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar about that book when it came out in the spring of 2004. In just a moment, our conversation.
Have you ever opened a time capsule? You're about to. This interview is from national radio personality Bill Thompson's 30-year interview archive. Enjoy.
So here now, from 2004, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
This is your fifth book, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Is it getting easier?
Yes, it has. I'm surprised. The first book I did, I was totally terrified. It was autobiographical. About a month before it was getting ready to come out, I called the publisher and said, "Stop the presses." They said, "Are you out of your mind?" And I just had to go along with it and grin and bear it. And, fortunately it did well. But it's a scary proposition.
Well, publishing is a strange business, but I guess that's a whole other topic for another book. You've been at work on this book for almost 12 years. Obviously, something that holds your attention, holds your focus for this long must be very important to you.
Well, it really wasn't 12 years working on the book. I first became aware of the subject 12 years ago. And then I worked on the book for 3 years.
But still, that's a big chunk of your life to devote to something that you must feel very strongly about this.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I feel strongly about it. And I enjoy doing research. So that part of it, I don't mind how long it takes. I'm finding things out. It's something that drives me. I have a little bit of the detective in me. And I just enjoy finding new things out.
So you would not have... I gather, had not even heard about the exploits of your friend Smitty before 1992?
Before 1992, I remembered Smitty as one of my dad's friends. He was kind of like my uncle. He used to sneak up on me on the subway sometimes and try to scare me and talk to me. And just a funny guy that I knew that was quite a character and a friend of my dad's.
Now, I can understand he might not have talked with you a great deal about his experiences, but he didn't even talk with your father about his experiences?
Never talked with my dad about it.
But they were both veterans.
They're both vets, but my dad didn't see any action. So my dad was bitter about still is bitter about his World War II experience because he wanted to fight. He was an artilleryman, and he wanted to take his gun crew over to Europe and shoot up Hitler's troops. And, they didn't get that chance because of the segregation policy of the United States Army.
Well, it occurred to me that if not for a few key battles and a few directions that the war took, maybe Leonard Smith might not have seen action either. He might have gone on the whole war just being a training unit at Fort Hood, Texas, or Camp Hood, Texas.
That's entirely possible. But what happened after D-Day, as the Allies pushed into the European continent, the German tanks and tank units were much superior to the Allies. And all the frontline tank units got torn up. And by October of 1944, Patton needed new tankers, and he had nowhere to go other than the 761st, who had been trained. They'd been training for 2.5 years.
At that point, they were probably the best trained battalion in the entire Army.
They were. It's not an overstatement on my part to say that this was Patton's best tank unit.
And they were good.
Yes, they were. They were excellent, and they were so good that on the first day of battle, their commanding officer got wounded and had to be taken off the field, and a captain and a lieutenant took over command and did exactly what was needed right there outside of Metz, where the Germans had stopped the whole Allied advance into the German production heartland there, where they were producing all their war material.
I hadn't realized until I read your book that most combat troops saw maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of combat. Now here we have a battalion seeing 6 straight months of combat, hard combat.
Yeah, the reason that they had to keep going was there were no other tankers. Learning tank warfare, it requires a lot of study, and you just don't learn it in the 8-week period that was standard. So by them training for 2.5 years, they understood a lot of things, such as the possibilities, the strengths and weaknesses of the German equipment, and the strengths and weaknesses of American equipment, and how to exploit that on the battlefield. They were fully aware of that, and Patton had seen them at the war games down at Fort Hood and realized that they knew what they were doing.
Here's these teenage kids, basically, seeing a Sherman tank and thinking, this is great. This is a wonderful piece of machinery. But they weren't told everything there was to tell them about the Sherman tank, were they?
Oh, no, and they had no idea that going out into battle with a Sherman tank would be just like riding in a car, because the German success rate against our armor was 100%, and our success rate of the gun that they had on the Sherman tank initially against the German armor was 0. So they were death traps. A number of the tank units called the Sherman tank a Ronson, because it would get hit and start burning.
Oh, gee. Do you think that if they had known that, would that have changed anything about the way that they looked at their duty?
I don't think it would have changed the way they looked at their duty, but it certainly would have made them approach things differently. Fortunately for the 761st, the Army beefed up the tanks that they used right there after D-Day. They realized that there was a problem. So the tank that they had was the E8 Sherman, what they call the EZ-8. And it had beefed up armor, and it had a good gun on it that affected a kill ratio on German armor of about 40%. So now they had a chance. In addition to that, the German turret was hand cranked, and it took over a minute to make a 360-degree revolution, whereas on the Sherman tank, it had an electric motor, and it could turn 360 degrees in 15 seconds. So speed actually was the only thing that they had going for them, their ability to shoot fast, and also these guys realized that they could hot rod the tanks. They hot rodded the tanks and had them so that they do up to 40 miles an hour. They were only supposed to be doing 20. They got twice the speed out of it, and the German couldn't ever keep them in sight because they'd move inside the German trajectory or outside the German trajectory. They knew that they had to do that, and they would swarm the German tanks. And that's how they defeated them.
That probably comes from the 2 years of training in Texas.
Texas and Louisiana.
Louisiana, yeah. Where it's scorchingly hot. The temperature inside a tank down there gets probably well into the 100 degree plus. Now you're over in Europe, and you're in the Battle of the Bulge, and you're fighting in sub-zero temperatures, the worst winter in 35 years. These guys experienced both ends of the weather spectrum.
Exactly. And in Louisiana, they had to deal with mud. So that really helped them, though, when they got over to Europe, because a lot of the times the fields were muddy or snowed, and the German tanks were real heavy, and they would get bogged down in that mud. That was another advantage that a lighter tank had, but it wasn't a very overwhelming advantage, and they really had to be careful.
After this short break, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar describes the even bigger challenge the 761st faced.
AI is not just for 22-year-old coders. A lot of us older adults are drawing on our life experience to find unique and creative ways to use AI, at home or at work. Got an AI success story you'd like to share? Tap the link below to visit our YouTube channel, AI After 40, and let's keep learning together.
Now back to my 2004 conversation with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Now, we've been talking so far about all the combat kind of challenges they had to face, but much of your book, you write about the kind of racial challenges that they faced before they went to combat, during combat, and after they came home from combat. This is one long battle for them.
Yes, it was. It's really ironic. In America protested the fact that the Germans were persecuting the Jews. There were signs in Berlin and other places around Germany that said "Nicht Juden," which means no Jews. And we protested against that and felt that it was worth going to war with Germany over that issue. Yet at the same time, in the American South, there were signs that said whites only. And, that was something that we had to reconcile as a nation. And these guys really understood that if they did well, maybe somebody would take the time to get into like what this was all about. And hopefully after the war, things would change.
German prisoners of war in Texas were treated better than the black servicemen in Texas.
That's absolutely true. At Tuskegee, at the Tuskegee Airmen's base in Alabama, Lena Horne was going to perform, and they brought in German prisoners to hear her perform, and they wouldn't allow the Tuskegee Airmen to perform, to hear her performance. She refused to perform until they let the black airmen come and hear the performance. It was that ridiculous. The German officers could go to the PX, and the black American soldiers could not.
And you'd think, or you'd like to think anyway, that things would be better after the war. I mean, here's this hugely successful battalion, great victories, and they come back to what? I mean, even people didn't even believe that they'd been over there fighting.
Yeah, because of the way that the Army hierarchy kept news of any integrated units from the public, no one really had any understanding that the blacks contributed anything other than the Tuskegee Airmen.
So maybe that contributed to the idea that they didn't feel what point is there in talking about it if nobody believes it anyway?
Right, or nobody was even aware of it.
Oh, gee. Well, of course, as you point out in your book, very few individual battalions in the war of whatever race have been really written about very extensively. So maybe it's time we picked out some of the more heroic battalions.
Yes, I think so.
But there's so many things in your book that, I mean, you can't obviously write about all 700 plus men in the battalion, so you zero in on 3 or 4 or 5 personalities, and you make them so likable and so real to us. I mean, I could just picture Pop Gates, letting Smitty drop into the lake and then seeing him on the shore. And instead of learning how to swim, he apparently dropped to the bottom and ran to the shore. I mean, what a great story that is.
But if you knew Smitty, you'd understand it, because he's a character, and he wasn't going to let himself drown. That's for sure.
I'm gathering that most of your material came from talking with him.
Well, Smitty and McBurney and Mr. McNeil, the three of them, we were able to get great information from them.
I'm guessing once you pick one brain, then that kind of inspires memories in the other two, and they start comparing stories and say, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that."
Right. And when we went, they have a reunion each year on Labor Day weekend, so we got to go to a couple of those and talk to the guys. But I couldn't conduct interviews with everybody, just over one weekend.
Well, but also, I mean, sadly enough, I mean, our veterans are dying at the rate of 1,000 a day. So
it's a real loss.
As you say in the book, I think you said the reunions now are down to 30 or 40 men.
Yeah.
Gee, that's well. At least you got them in time to get some of the institutional memory.
Right, and now that the book is out, McBurney has checked it out, and he called me and he said it's the best book done on us ever, and he thanked me. And that's the only. It's the only accolade that I wanted. I wanted them to appreciate what I did and feel that I did a good job.
We all think of them as heroes. Do they think of themselves as heroes?
These guys are still the most humble people you have ever encountered. They feel that they just did their job, and that it wasn't supposed to be about them getting individual recognition. They just had to do something as a unit, and they helped each other survive, and that was the most important thing to them.
But to liberate a concentration camp, and the way you write that scene in here is just astounding. It's almost as though they stumbled onto it.
That's exactly. They didn't know what they were doing. They knew it was some type of German facility, and as they approached the gate, the Germans started shooting at them. But McBurney and Smitty were in the same tank. Their tank was the first tank through the gates at Dachau.
Wow. And the memory of that doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. Some of the things that they saw in there, talking to McNeil, he like went into a couple of buildings and he saw some of those hideous medical experiments that the Germans were doing. I mean, he said he remembers seeing a jar full of eyeballs, and people hung up on hooks, and it reminded a lot of them of the lynchings that they had seen. And, there was the resonance there.
Did you feel like you had to tone down some of what they told you for this book?
I didn't want to get into too many of the gory. Excuse me. I didn't want to get into too many of the gory details. I just wanted to stick to the facts and not get too sensational about it, because those things are very sensitive to some people.
Yeah, that's true. I'm hoping that you have more stories that you can tell, more stories from World War II or from Korea or whatever the stories may come from. Because you write this. I love this book.
Oh, thank you very much. There are a number more that I hope to get the opportunity to tell. I really would like to write a novel about the Underground Railroad. That's a very American story that everybody's afraid to deal with, because there's still a divide in this country about the people who feel that slavery was evil and the people whose forebears owned slaves, and they don't feel that they should criticize that institution. There's some interesting stuff in there about General Patton. General Patton urinating on the Rhine. There's some very, very funny stuff in there, and some very poignant stuff. I just hope people enjoy reading it and enjoy learning about these people.
Members of the 761st Tank Battalion included 1 Medal of Honor winner, 11 Silver Stars, and over 300 Purple Hearts. Now, you can get your copy of Brothers in Arms by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you can also find my 1992 conversation with one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr.
What we were able to demonstrate and achieve in World War II would be a determining factor in the future of blacks in the Army Air Corps and in the armed services of the United States once World War II was over.
And my 1988 conversation with the son of a man who also broke down racial barriers, fighter Joe Louis, my conversation with Joe Louis Barrow, Jr.
The 1938 Schmeling fight was my father's most famous fight. It really foisted him from being a black heavyweight champion to a true American hero. He allowed white America to think of blacks in a different context.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you find podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, you know his voice. He's a voice actor who's been around for decades. My 1989 conversation with the great Stan Freberg.
A creative writing teacher told me I should give up all hopes of becoming a humorist or a creative writer. But needless to say, the first time I heard an audience of people laughing at something that I'd written, it occurred to me that the woman was full of art gum erasers,
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.